Snow fell heavier than the forecast had promised. By evening, West Concord looked like someone had shaken a giant snow globe and forgotten to stop. Streets blurred into white. Streetlights glowed in soft halos. The last train had already come and gone, leaving the station almost empty. Just the low hum of old heaters and the occasional crackle from the loudspeaker announcing nothing to no one. On the far end of the platform, on a steel bench that bit like ice through fabric, Marissa sat curled into herself. Her coat was too thin, seams fraying at the cuffs. Her jeans were stiff from the cold. Her fingers, raw and red, were jammed into her pockets as if she could hide them from the winter. Blonde hair, tangled and streaked with old dye, fell in messy strands around her face, catching snowflakes that melted slowly against her chilled skin. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The last proper meal she remembered was a bowl of soup from the church kitchen. It had tasted mostly of salt, but it had been hot. Now her stomach ached with the hollow, gnawing kind of hunger she'd learned to ignore. Her head throbbed dully. Her lips cracked when she swallowed. She kept her eyes on the floor, watching the snow gather in dirty slush near the platform edge. It was easier to look there than at the posters advertising weekend getaways and smiling families. Easier to look there than at the occasional stranger glancing her way and then quickly looking past her, as if poverty were contagious. She didn't want help. At least that's what she told herself. Really, she didn't want pity. The sound of small boots tapping across tile broke through the hum of the heaters. Light, quick steps, 2 sets, voices high and breathless, full of laughter. Marissa tried not to look up. Children always stared longer. They hadn't learned yet how to pretend not to see. "Daisy, wait for me," a little voice squeaked. "I am," another voice replied, slightly bolder. "You're just slow." They came into view at the edge of her lowered gaze. 2 pairs of boots, one purple, one blue, both dusted with snow. Marissa's eyes flicked up before she could stop them. 2 little girls, maybe 6 or 7, bundled in matching pink coats and knitted hats. Their cheeks were bright from the cold, noses a little red, eyes wide and curious. They looked like twins, same brown curls peeking out from under their hats, same dimple on the left cheek when they smiled. One twin, Daisy, she assumed, had stopped a few feet away and was staring right at her. Not with fear, not with disgust, just looking, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Marissa shifted, tucking her feet under the bench. She didn't want to scare them, didn't want to be the story they whispered about later. The world had already decided people like her were dangerous, broken, or lazy. She was too tired to argue with it. The girl took a step closer. "Don't," Marissa started, voice barely more than a whisper. "You should stay with your—" The small mittened hand reached forward and gently set something in her lap. It was a cookie, wrapped in a torn piece of tissue, strangely perfect in the center of all that chipped paint and rusted metal, shaped like a heart. Frosting, uneven and pink, crusted around the edges, decorated with too many sprinkles. Marissa stared at it, stunned. Her ears rang with the effort of trying not to cry over a cookie. "You need a home," the little girl said softly, as if simply stating a fact. The other twin, panting, caught up and stood beside her, eyes flickering between Marissa and the cookie. "And we," Daisy glanced back at her sister, then finished with quiet certainty. "And we need a mommy." Marissa's throat closed, her eyes burned. Before she could force any words out, a deeper voice cut through the air. "Daisy, Lily, back here now." A tall man strode over quickly, snow dusting the shoulders of his dark wool coat. His jaw was clean-shaven, his hair slightly mussed from the wind, and his eyes, sharp and observant, were immediately on Marissa. Protective instinct rolled off him in waves. He gently pulled both girls behind him, one hand wrapped around each small shoulder. "What were you doing with my daughters?" he asked, tone low and tight, not quite accusing, not quite calm. Marissa's hands went up slightly, palms open. "I didn't," her voice shook. I didn't do anything, I swear, she just. He followed her gaze down to the cookie in her lap, back up to her face, down again to the torn coat, the bruised knuckles, the thin sneakers soaked through with melted snow. His eyes caught on her fingers, the slight tremor that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with cold. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of wind pushing snow across the track. Marissa tried to stand. She got halfway up before the world tilted sideways. The fluorescent lights above shattered into a blur. Her knees buckled, and her shoulders slammed into the metal column beside the bench. Pain flashed across her temple. The rest of her body felt like water. "Daddy," Lily cried, "she's falling." He caught her before she hit the ground. One strong arm went around her back, the other catching the back of her head. She was shockingly light, like lifting a bundle of blankets with bones. Her hair smelled faintly of cheap shampoo and winter air. Her eyes fluttered weakly. "Do," she murmured, voice barely audible. "Don't take the cookie, it's theirs." The twins stared up at their father, eyes wide and shining. "Daddy," Daisy whispered, "she's dying." He looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, then at his daughters. He was Jonah Reeves, CEO of Northline Rails, a man used to making difficult decisions in boardrooms, weighing risk and profit and public perception in the space of seconds. This one took him less than a breath. "Come on," he said, voice suddenly steady. "We're taking her home." They moved through the swirling snow toward the parking lot, the twins gripping the back of his coat as he carried Marissa. Her head lolled slightly against his chest, blonde hair brushing his chin. Snow landed on her eyelashes and didn't melt. "Daddy," Lily asked, voice trembling, "is she gonna be okay?" "She will be," Jonah said quietly, more a promise to himself than to them. "I'm not letting anything happen to her." No trains, no taxis. The roads were icy, but his SUV waited near the entrance, engine still faintly warm from his earlier arrival. He laid Marissa carefully across the back seat, buckled her in as best he could, and cranked up the heat. The twins climbed in beside her, Daisy holding the cookie like it was an artifact, Lily tucking a scarf around Marissa's feet. "She must be really cold, Daddy," Lily whispered, eyes wide. "I know," he said, "we'll fix that." The drive home was silent, except for the hiss of the heater and the quiet sniffles of two little girls staring at the woman beside them. When they reached the house, a wide old brick home at the end of a cul-de-sac, warm light glowing behind frosted windows, Jonah parked, stepped into the snow and lifted Marissa again. Her body sagged against him, limp and unnervingly still. The front door opened with a rush of warmth. The smell of pine from the tree in the living room, cocoa from earlier, and laundry detergent enveloped them. The twins kicked off their boots and followed him in socked feet across the hardwood. He laid Marissa on the couch near the fireplace, then tossed another log onto the embers. Flames leapt higher, throwing orange light across her pale face. "Daddy," Daisy whispered from the rug, clutching her sister's hand. "Did we bring her home now?" Jonah looked at them, then at the woman on his couch. A stranger, a homeless woman, someone he should, by every rule of caution, keep far away from his daughters. But he thought of the cookie in her lap, the way she'd tried to stand and move away so the girls wouldn't get in trouble, the way she'd worried about their cookie even while collapsing. He exhaled slowly. "For now," he said quietly, "yes, for now she's home." Marissa woke to warmth. For a long moment she thought it was a dream, the kind she'd had on the coldest nights, blankets that were always just out of reach, a fire that never quite touched her skin, a voice saying, "It's okay now." She blinked. The ceiling above her was white, faintly textured. A chandelier glowed softly, dimmed. There were framed photos on the walls, a man and two little girls by a lake, one of the twins holding a giant balloon, another of them on a carousel. The couch beneath her was impossibly soft. Something heavy and warm lay over her, A thick, cream-colored blanket. Her fingers, still tingling, sank into it. She turned her head. A drawing sat on the coffee table, crayon on printer paper. Two little girls in pink coats stood on either side of a taller woman with long yellow hair. Above them, a big smiling sun. At the top, in shaky letters, someone had written, "Our family." Marissa stared at it, unable to look away. "You're safe." She jumped slightly, wincing as her head pulsed. The man from the station sat in an armchair a few feet away, sleeves rolled up, a mug in his hand. His eyes were tired but focused. He set the mug down and picked up a small thermometer. "Don't move too fast," he said. "You hit your head when you fell. I checked your pupils earlier. No signs of a concussion, but you were hypothermic and severely dehydrated." He clicked the thermometer on and aimed it gently at her forehead. "No fever now, that's good." "Where?" Her voice came out hoarse. She swallowed, it hurt. "Where am I?" "My house," he said simply. "I'm Jonah. Those drawings are from my daughters." As if summoned, the sound of padded footsteps echoed down the hallway. The twins paused near the doorway, peeking in with matching expressions of awe. "She's awake," Lily whispered too loud. They hurried over, each carrying a small mug in front of them with both hands. Drawing close, they placed the mugs carefully on the table beside the couch. "We made you warm milk," Daisy announced proudly. "With honey. Daddy said honey helps." Marissa pushed herself up slowly, using one hand to brace the back of the couch. Her muscles ached, but she was no longer shivering. "Thank you," she managed. "That's very kind." Lily edged closer, tilting her head as she studied Marissa's face. "Do you like your hair?" she asked suddenly. "Our mommy had hair like yours, but yours is more wavy." "Lily," Jonah said quietly, "give her some space." Marissa clutched the blanket tighter, suddenly self-conscious of her greasy roots and uneven ends. "Your mommy," she started carefully. "Is she?" "She's in heaven," Daisy said matter-of-factly, as children sometimes do. "But we still talk to her." Lily nodded. She liked snow and pink and singing. Daddy says her laugh was loud. The girls didn't look sad saying it exactly, just honest, like stating another fact. Marissa swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said softly. The twins nodded like they'd heard that sentence too many times to count. "When you're stronger," Jonah said quietly to Marissa, "we'll figure things out. You can rest for now. The doctor said you need food, sleep, and time." "The doctor," she blinked, "I can't pay for." He shook his head. "That's not your problem." She stared at the fire instead of him, fighting the urge to argue. Pride was sometimes all she had left, but pride didn't feed you. Pride didn't keep you from freezing to death on a bench. She lifted the mug of warm milk. Her hands trembled. Honey clung to the inside of the cup in slow golden streaks. She took a small sip. It was the best thing she'd tasted in months. Over the next days, the house adjusted around her like it had been waiting. The first morning, she tried to leave. She folded the blanket, smoothed the couch cushion, and walked quietly to the front door. Her borrowed socks slid a little on the hardwood floor. She placed her hand on the cold metal of the handle, took a breath, and, "Where are you going?" Daisy's sleepy voice floated down the hall. A second later, the twins appeared, hair messy, pajamas wrinkled. They blinked at her with identical confusion. Marissa dropped her hand. "I don't want to cause trouble. You've done enough. I should go before." "Before what?" Jonah's voice came from behind her. He'd been in the kitchen, apparently, coffee mug in hand again. She turned, cheeks flushing. "I'm a stranger in your house," she said. "I don't have anything, no job, no anything. I shouldn't be here." Lily walked over and wrapped her arms around Marissa's leg. "But we need you," she said simply. Daisy nodded fiercely. "We found you. That means you're ours now." Jonah watched the three of them, something flickering behind his eyes. Old instincts said this was dangerous, reckless. All the parenting books he'd devoured after his wife died said, structure, boundaries, caution. But grief had taught him something else. Few things in life came with guarantees. Most of it was risk and hope. "We'll talk about practical things later," he said. "But for now, you're staying, at least until you're strong enough to decide from somewhere other than survival." She stared at him, stunned. "No one just lets people stay," she whispered. He gave a small, crooked almost smile. "My daughter's dragged a stranger home from a train station," he said. "I think we're already past normal." She laughed. It came out small and rusty, like it hadn't been used in a long time. He heard that too. Day by day, color seeped back into her world. Marissa started to eat regularly. At first it was small portions, half a bowl of oatmeal, a piece of toast, a little soup. Her stomach had shrunk from months of sporadic meals, but slowly, carefully. She reclaimed the simple act of feeding herself, without worrying where the next bite would come from. The girls never seemed to tire of her. "Marissa, can you do my braids?" "Marissa, look, my snowman has a hat." "Can you read us the story again? The one with the train that gets stuck." She learned that Daisy liked to pretend she was older by precisely 8 minutes and would use it to justify bossing Lily around. Lily compensated by inventing elaborate make-believe worlds where she was queen of everything, including bedtime. She learned that they both loved drawing. One afternoon, she sat cross-legged on the rug with them, a roll of paper spread across the floor. Crayons rolled everywhere. "You're holding it funny," she told Daisy gently. "I'm holding it like Lily," Daisy argued. "Wrong example," Marissa smiled. "Try this." She took Daisy's small hand and guided her fingers into a different grip. "It'll hurt less this way when you color big spaces." They spent an hour making snowflakes, trains, stick-figure families under hearts. At one point, Marissa drew a little girl standing alone on a bench under a dark sky. Lily pointed, "Is that you?" Marissa hesitated. "It was," she said, "not anymore." She didn't notice Jonah standing in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, watching. He'd started watching her a lot. Not in the way people watched someone they didn't trust, in the way someone watched a painting reveal itself slowly with each added brushstroke. Curiosity without demand, interest without pressure. Sometimes he saw flashes of something broken, how she flinched when someone dropped a dish in the kitchen, the way her eyes flicked to every exit whenever she entered a new room, her habit of apologizing before she even knew if she'd done anything wrong. One night after the girls had gone to bed, he heard muffled sounds from the living room. He found Marissa curled on the couch, stuck in a nightmare. "No, I did," her voice was hoarse. "I didn't steal anything, you have to believe me." "Marissa," he stayed a few feet away, hands visible, voice soft. "You're safe, it's me, you're home." Her eyes snapped open, wild for a moment, then refocused. Tears streaked her temples. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "You don't have to apologize for dreaming," he answered. She didn't say anything, but her shoulders dropped a fraction. Later, haunted by those words, "I didn't steal anything," he opened his laptop in his study. The house was quiet. The girls slept down the hall. Marissa was back under a blanket near the fire, breathing softly. He typed her full name. Articles, one in particular. Design student expelled after alleged theft of final project. He read it once, then again. The story was vague, no details from her side, just a line about the victim's family being influential donors. His jaw clenched. He shut the laptop. The next evening, he found her in the living room folding laundry, while the girls decorated the tree with paper snowflakes that shed confetti everywhere. "Can we talk?" he asked. She glanced up, hand stilling over a small pink sweater. "Sure." He sat on the arm of the chair across from her. "I looked you up," he said plainly. There was no point pretending he hadn't. Her fingers tightened around the fabric. Of course you did. They said you stole a design in school. She stared at the sweater in her lap. Did you? He asked. His voice was calm but firm. He owed his girl's honesty even if it hurt. Her eyes lifted to his. No, she said quietly. Just that. No speech, no explanation, no attempt to win him over, just one word, steady despite the fear behind it. He nodded slowly, but he didn't say, I believe you. His silence, careful and cautious, tried to be neutral. It landed like a verdict. She watched his face, waiting for something that didn't come. The next inhale shook. I see, she whispered. She stood, folded the sweater, and walked down the hall. When she returned, she had her small, worn tote bag over her shoulder. His stomach dropped. Marissa, what are you doing? You let me stay longer than anyone's ever let me stay, she said quietly, eyes glistening. I'm grateful. That's not what I asked. You asked if I'd taken something that wasn't mine, she replied, and I told you the truth, but your face looked exactly like everyone else's when they read about me. Her voice broke, then steadied. I can't put your girls through that, through whispers, through people saying their dad lives with a thief. They're my daughters, he said, taking a step toward her. That's my choice. And it's my choice not to stay where I'm already on trial, she answered softly. In the doorway, Daisy and Lily had appeared, clutching a paper snowflake between them. Their eyes were wide. Where are you going? Lily asked, voice small. Marissa swallowed hard. I have to go, sweetheart. Did we do something wrong? Daisy blurted. We can be better. We won't be too loud when you sleep. No, Marissa said quickly, dropping to her knees in front of them. You did everything right. You made me feel like I belonged. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. But you're our mommy. The word cracked something inside Marissa clean in half. I'm not, she cupped their faces, thumbs brushing away tears. I'm not good enough to be your mommy. You are, Daisy insisted, hands gripping Marissa's sleeves. You're perfect. She shook her head, blinking fast. One day you'll have someone better, someone whole, for now. She kissed their foreheads, one then the other, breathed them in like a last breath, then stood before she lost her nerve. Marissa, Jonah said, voice rough, don't do this. She didn't look back. If she did, she would shatter. She opened the door. Winter hit her full in the face, cold and biting. She stepped onto the porch, pulled her thin coat tighter, and walked into the snow. He watched from the doorway as her figure grew smaller, swallowed by the falling white. Behind him, the twins sobbed. He didn't stop her. Not because he wanted her to go, but because he'd spent years believing that if someone really wanted to leave, you respected it. You didn't beg. You didn't trap. You didn't repeat the cycles of control he'd seen growing up. He closed the door on a house that suddenly felt 10 sizes too big. The next days blurred. The girls moved through the house like ghosts, their laughter muted. They still painted and played and argued over who got which cup, but at night the questions started. When is Mommy, Marissa, coming back? Did we make her mad? Did she stop loving us? Each question cut him open in a different way. She didn't stop anything, he would say, smoothing their hair. Sometimes grown-ups get scared too. In the quiet after they slept, he read her letter. The envelope had been left on the counter. Addressed in careful handwriting, for Daisy and Lily. He opened it with shaking hands. My sweet girls. You gave me something I didn't think I deserved. You made me feel like I belonged. I'm not leaving because I stopped caring. I'm leaving because I don't want you to love someone who doesn't know how to love herself yet. One day, I hope I'll be strong enough to come back. Not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who can give you the love you truly deserve. Until then, remember this. You are kind. You are brave. You are worth staying for. Love. Marissa. He closed his eyes. His mind replayed every choice he'd made, every time he'd asked for verification instead of taking her word, every moment he'd put fear before trust, grief before growth. Around 4 a.m. on the fifth day, he heard a small whimper. He rushed to the twins' room. Lily's forehead burned under his palm. Her cheeks were flushed. Daisy, pale and panicked, clutched her sister's hand. "She's hot," Daisy whispered. "She keeps calling for Mommy." Anna, no, not Anna, he corrected himself sharply in his mind. Different little girl, different story, but the fear tasted exactly the same. He bundled Lily in a blanket, carried her to the car, Daisy on his heels. The hospital's white lights, the smell of disinfectant, the beeping monitors, it all crashed into him at once. "Her body is under physical stress," the doctor said gently. "And sometimes," he glanced at the twins asleep in separate chairs, one hand stretched out between them, "sometimes children's bodies process emotional shock in ways that look like sickness." "She misses someone," Jonah said quietly. "You can't fix grief," the doctor replied, "but you can make sure she's surrounded by people she trusts when she wakes up." When he sat back down, the hospital chair creaked under his weight. The clock ticked. Machines beeped. Lily turned in her sleep, mumbling something. "Marissa," she whispered hoarsely, "don't go." He dropped his head into his hands. "Please," he murmured, to no one in particular, to everyone in particular, "please come back." She arrived in a rush of cold air and apology. The next morning, the automatic doors whirred open, and a blur of blonde and denim crossed the lobby with almost reckless speed. Marissa's cheeks were streaked with dried tears, her hair pulled back hastily, jacket half-zipped. She'd taken the first bus she could find when she'd run into the twins' neighbor, who blurted out something about ambulances and fever and the hospital. When she saw Lily in the bed, a tiny shape under so much white, her legs almost gave way. She crossed the room in 3 strides. "Lily," her voice cracked, "baby, I'm here." Lily's eyelids fluttered. "Mommy," she rasped, voice raw. "Yes," Marissa choked out, falling to her knees beside the bed. Her fingers framed the girl's face so carefully as if afraid she might break. "Yes, sweetheart, Mommy's here. I'm so sorry I left." Lily's hand, small and hot, reached for her wrist and clung. "Don't leave again," she whispered. "Never," Marissa promised, tears spilling freely now. "I won't leave again." Daisy stirred in the chair, blinking awake. When she saw Marissa, she didn't say anything at first. She just slid to the floor and wrapped her arms around Marissa's waist with all the strength she had. Jonah stood in the doorway. He had been about to go find coffee, had been about to call yet another specialist, or maybe a friend to ask a question he couldn't quite form. But when he saw Marissa at his daughter's bedside, everything else fell away. He walked in slowly. She looked up, eyes red, breath uneven. There was apology in her gaze, fear, hope, and something else, like she'd finally decided she was done running. "I shouldn't have gone," she whispered. "I shouldn't have let you," he replied. He came closer and knelt on the other side of the bed. For a moment, the 3 adults and 2 children existed in a tiny universe of beeps and white curtains and raw emotion. "You don't have to be perfect," he said quietly, voice meant for her alone. "You don't have to prove anything to me, to anyone." Her lip trembled. "You didn't believe me," she said, not accusatory, just honest. He swallowed hard. "I've spent so long expecting people to leave that it felt safer to assume the worst. That's not your fault, that's mine." He reached across the blankets and took her hand carefully, as if asking permission. "Come home," he said. "You don't have to come back as someone who doesn't need anyone. You don't have to come back fixed, just come back. Let us be your home too." She looked at their joined hands, at the twins watching with wide eyes, and then back at him. "Are you sure?" she whispered. He smiled, tired and soft. "2 little girls dragged you into our life from a train station in a snowstorm. because they decided you were their mother after one cookie. I think the decision was made a long time ago." A shaky laugh escaped her. "Yeah," she breathed. "Okay, I'll come home." 1 year later, the story of the woman on the bench was almost legend in their house. Snow fell differently now, less like a threat, more like a memory. It was Christmas Eve, and instead of steel benches and empty platforms, Marissa stood in a warm kitchen, flour dusting her nose, hands deep in cookie dough. Her hair, clean and brushed, fell in a braid down her back. Soft music played in the background. A pine wreath hung crookedly over the stove because Daisy insisted that even food needs Christmas. "Don't eat that," she said, swatting gently at Lily's hand as it reached for raw dough. "But it smells good," Lily pouted. "It'll smell better baked," Marissa countered. "Mommy, look," Daisy called from the living room. Marissa wiped her hands on a towel and walked in. The twins stood proudly in front of the tree, which was leaning just a little too much to the left. Ornaments clustered in the lower half where their arms could reach, leaving the top oddly bare. In the middle of the tree hung a small, hand-painted wooden plaque. "This is our mommy." Her breath caught. "When did you?" "We made it at school," Lily said, bouncing on her toes. "You were supposed to see it tomorrow," Daisy added, "but we couldn't wait." She knelt down and pulled them into her arms, pressing her face into their hair. It still stunned her sometimes that she was allowed to have this, to be this. Later, they bundled into coats and walked as a family to Concord Hall, where Jonah's company was hosting its annual holiday gala. This year, he'd insisted the theme wouldn't just be about profit or expansion. Rebuilding hope, he'd told his PR team, with rails, with jobs, with people. They'd stared at him like he'd started speaking in poetry. He hadn't cared. He'd also insisted on something else. "Feature her designs," he'd told the event coordinator. Pointing at the sketches, Marissa had quietly shown him one night, thinking he'd shrug and say they were nice. He had not shrugged. Now, under the vaulted glass ceiling of the hall, surrounded by suits and gowns and champagne, Marissa's work walked down the runway. Models moved slowly under soft lights wearing dresses that looked like snow at midnight and scarves embroidered with tiny, repeating train tracks that curved into heart shapes at the ends. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Applause rose like a wave. Marissa stood behind the curtain, hands clasped tightly, heart racing. She'd never imagined she'd see her designs on anyone other than scrap paper. "Mommy," Daisy whispered, tugging at her hand, "they're clapping for you." Lily nodded sagely, "Because you're amazing." When the final notes of the music faded, the host stepped up to the microphone. "We have one last part of the program tonight," she said. "A little something different. The Reeves girls have something they'd like to say." Daisy and Lily walked out onto the stage, their hands locked together. The crowd cooed. Cameras flashed. Lily leaned toward the microphone first. "Home is where Mommy Marissa sings us to sleep," she said, voice small but clear. Daisy followed without missing a beat. "Home is where she smiles and where Daddy smiles because of her." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then something shifted. People stood, not for the CEO's profits, not for the gala. For this, two small voices using the simplest words to say the biggest thing: "We are loved now." Behind the curtain, Marissa pressed a hand over her mouth. Tears blurred the lights into streaks of gold. Jonah walked out, joining the girls' center stage. In his hand he held a pale blue scarf, frayed at the ends, familiar. "This," he said into the microphone, holding it gently, "was left behind on a bench at the West Concord station last year. I found it when I carried a stranger into my car because my daughters asked me to." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd, not mocking but moved. "She thought she was a problem," he continued. "A burden, someone to be avoided, but she was. She was the answer to a question I didn't know how to ask." He turned his head, eyes finding her behind the curtain as if there were no one else in the room. "Marissa," he said, his voice trembling just enough that only she would really notice, "you don't owe us perfection. You never did. You don't have to prove your worth. You already did that the first time you handed a scared little girl a piece of your heart." He set the scarf on a small stand, like a relic. "You just have to stay," he finished, "because our home is you." He extended a hand, not toward the crowd but toward the side of the stage. Someone nudged Marissa gently. She stepped out, blinking under the lights. For a second the old instinct flared, "Run, hide, this isn't your world." But then she saw them. Two identical pairs of brown eyes, full of absolute faith. One pair of hazel eyes, finally unguarded. She walked forward. The girls barreled into her mid-step, arms wrapping around her waist. "Mommy," Daisy whispered into her dress, "don't ever leave again." "Never," she said, voice breaking in the best way. "Never again." Jonah stepped closer, one arm going around her shoulders, the other around the twins. For a moment, they were a cluster of warmth in a room full of glitter and glass. Snow fell outside the hall, tapping softly against the tall windows like a blessing. Weeks later, the year wound to a close. On New Year's Eve, their house glowed from every window. Paper snowflakes still hung crookedly from the ceiling. The smell of sugar and cinnamon wrapped around the rooms like a blanket. Marissa stood at the kitchen counter, sliding the last tray of cookies from the oven. Her hair was tied up loosely, a few tendrils escaping to frame her face. Daisy and Lily sat at the table, dipping still warm cookies into glasses of milk and arguing about which firework color would be best. "Gold," Daisy insisted, "because Mommy's hair is gold." "Pink," Lily countered, "because everything is better pink." Jonah leaned in the doorway, watching them with the quiet wonder of someone still not quite used to this much peace. On the wall near the hallway, amidst framed photos, hung a new picture. The four of them standing in the snow. Marissa in the middle, wearing a knitted scarf, no longer frayed, Jonah beside her, hand resting lightly on her back, the twins on either side holding up their mittened hands toward the camera. Underneath, in the uneven but determined handwriting of two little girls, were the words, "Our family." As midnight approached, they gathered by the big living room window. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with distant shouts and the pop of early fireworks. Daisy curled against Marissa's side. Lily sat on Jonah's shoulders, hands gripping his hair. The countdown drifted from a TV in the background. 10. Marissa glanced at Jonah. He was already looking at her. 9. "Do you remember the train station?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "I remember thinking I was going to disappear there." 8. He shook his head. "No chance. Two tiny forces of nature had other plans." 7. She laughed under her breath. "They really did drag me home, huh?" 6. "They knew before I did," he said. "Before you did." 5. She swallowed, emotion thick in her chest. 4. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" His brow furrowed gently. "Not just for saving me that night," she replied. "For letting me stay after. For believing me, even if it took a while. For giving me a place that feels like it was always waiting for me to come back." 3. His hand found hers, fingers weaving together. 2. "Thank you," he murmured, "for taking a cookie from a stranger and letting my daughters adopt you." 1. The sky exploded in a wash of color, gold, pink, green, like flowers blooming across the dark. The twins squealed. Fireworks reflected in their wide eyes in the window in the silver of Marissa's necklace. "Happy New Year," Daisy shouted. "Happy New Year," Lily echoed. "Happy New Year," Jonah said quietly, leaning his forehead against Marissa's. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment. "Happy New Year," she whispered back, to our home. Outside, snow fell soft as ash, gentle and slow. Not the kind that buried train stations and benches. The kind that covered everything ugly and broken in a thin, clean sheet, giving the world another chance in the morning. Inside that house, the girls giggling over misshapen cookies, Jonah laughing in a way he hadn't in years, Marissa standing with her hands dusted in flour and her heart finally full. One simple, impossible truth settled in. She had needed a home. They had needed a mommy. Somehow, against every odds, in the middle of a winter that could have ended her story, they had found all of that in one another.